now we're going to have a very interesting agenda point, because I don't know what they're going to say, because there's a big announcement apparently going to happen. Yes, so I don't know what's going to happen, but I know that we have two very exciting people on stage. On one hand, we have Yuval Rose, if I pronounce this correctly. Just a second founder, or the third founder. Carl is a founder. Before we had, excuse me, Sergey Nazarov from Chainlink. So I'm going to hand over to Daniela Barbarossa. Not that you have behind me. You're from Linux Foundation and Hyperledge as well. And you've been working with Digital Assets, who I've been told has an engineering group here in Zurich. So you sort of have the Swiss footprint too. And I'm excited to hear what you're going to announce now. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Alexander. And thank you for the Home of Blockchain for hosting us today. I promised I'll be dancing and singing at the end. Just kidding. For those of you who don't know me, only me. I'll get you to dance. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Daniela Barbosa. I'm the general manager at the Linux Foundation across all blockchain and identity projects. I also serve as the executive director of what is today known as the Hyperledger Foundation, which since 2015 has really been the home for open source projects across the Linux Foundation. Earlier today, there was a panel and where we talked a bit about LF Decentralized Trust, which is the new super umbrella that's going to be the home for blockchain, digital identity, and other technologies that are focused on decentralized technologies. And I think, as we mature in the market, I've known Yuval since 2017. We're really seeing a need for open source. And the last panel talking about open source and financial markets clearly indicated that open source has won in blockchain specifically. There is no doubt about it. There's no question about it that open source is needed. But very importantly, open governance. And I've always believed very early on that as blockchain networks matured and as blockchain networks in the enterprise became adopted and really bringing value to the market, that in addition to building those networks with open source, it would be really critical to making sure that the governance of those networks was also truly open and transparent. So I'm going to let Yuval introduce himself and talk a little bit about what we just announced today as a partnership with the Canton Network.
Thank you, Daniela, and thank you everyone for joining. I'm Yuval. I'm the co-founder of Digital Asset. So we'll go straight to it. We've been in this space for quite some time. It's getting close to 10 years. And for us, 10 years ago, we had a vision that every asset in the world will become a digital asset. And what we mean by a digital asset, it's not that portion of the asset will be digital, but it's everything is going to be digital. From issuance to life cycle events to transfer, everything is going to be digital. And we believe that it has to be on a public chain, and I'll explain in a second why. But before you do that, you have to solve for some critical, building blocks. And the way we think about it is we say, first of all, privacy and control. We believe that the internet, it's a public network, but wouldn't work if you went to your bank website and you saw all of your peer accounts and everything that is available, and you were able to just use all of their products and services. To us, the word permissionless does not go hand in hand with regulation. So we really wanted to figure out a way how you can create a public network that can allow for privacy and control, but at the same time allow to interoperate. So last week, such network got created. It's called the Canton Network, inspired by Switzerland. So when you think about Switzerland, first of all, our team is here in Zurich, the ones that develop. We actually have the creator of Canton sitting in the back row, being very humbled. But when you think about a lot of these public permissionless chains, they're effectively said, all come into one network, put all of your assets into one network, and you'll be able to interoperate with one another. But when you start thinking about interoperating with one another, when you have privacy, well, that's hard. So when we start thinking about, well, how is Switzerland working? Well, Switzerland have different cantons. Those cantons can have their own governance rules. They set their own tax regime. They have all kinds of other rules, but they all interoperate under Switzerland. So for us, that was really this vision for this global network, and that's really what was announced just an hour ago, but really launched last week.
See, clapping. Well, it's great to see. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the participants in the Canton Network? It's been a long journey, and today, it's launched, and we'll talk a bit about the collaboration that we have with the Linux Foundation as well. But tell us a little bit about who is participating in the Canton Network, and some of the participants who are going to be part of the governance as well.
Sure, I'll start actually with governance, and I think that as we were getting ready to launch the network, governance to us was extremely important, and not just because I believe that some of the permissionless chains out there, in my opinion, don't truly have open decentralized governance, but also because of the target clients that we want to bring into Canton. And when you think about regulated markets, governance is something that is a very important component. So as we started thinking 2 years ago, should we just create yet another foundation and yet again another rule book? Fairly quickly, we realized that if we really want to lead by example and kind of show that we're very serious about what we're doing, let's actually go to something that is proven, trusted, and truly decentralized. And Linux have been around for quite a long time. We know Daniela for a long time, and she's been a great leader. And we just approached, and we had some pretty interesting conversations in the early days trying to explain why this is different. But eventually we got over the line, and I think that it's a bittersweet moment for me as a CEO, because until that moment, I was a dictator. I was able to do whatever I want. We just said, this is what we're going to do. This is where we're going to go. But as of last week, the foundation was set. It's going to be a U.S. foundation. We're not hiding. We're in the U.S. It's going to some pretty interesting organization from a very wide spectrum. But I would say that the joint mission of all of those organizations is that they really, truly want to bring an open network that have proper governance built into it. So digital asset, as of last week, is just one vote of many organizations. I think we're getting close to 30 at this point, and it's only going to grow, I think, from today. And what we're going to focus on is how do we bring more and more regulated bodies to build what I consider to be real-world applications that drive utility to markets and to other industries eventually. I'm very, very excited about that. So that's on the governance side of thing. And I think that if we didn't get that right, I actually think we wouldn't get everything else right. And funny story, I won't say who, but I ran into someone today at the gym, and he said to me, the fact that you chose Linux is one of the most important reasons why we will get more and more comfortable with this technology, is because we truly know that this is an organization that can drive proper governance. And that's extremely important. When it comes to the network itself, you will see in the PR that there's a pretty wide spectrum, infrastructure provider, technology providers, different organizations that help run nodes, manage keys, those type of organizations that we're used to from the crypto community. But what's really exciting is that there are some organizations that you, generally speaking, in financial services that are publicly traded, regulated, that are also participating. And I truly believe that the reason they are getting comfortable is, again, because Canton allows you to meet regulatory requirements. It's not there's no regulatory arbitrage needed. You could actually build applications that meet the regulatory framework in different countries, different jurisdictions. And I'm very excited to show some of the applications that either have been built already or we know are in the process of being built.
I recently listened to your podcast it was Moody's podcast, and where you talked about institutional adoption of these technologies. And it's been a very long, I know digital assets has been involved in the Linux Foundation since 2016 as one of the founding members of Hyperledger, but the journey has been fairly long. What are the things that you're seeing in the market that point to the institutions being ready to be part of not just participating, but part of the governance of these network?
I'll actually start first from the regulator's perspective. And I think that this industry has done a disservice to regulators in many, many points and times. And I think that the reason is that a lot of times when you hear crypto players coming in, they come in without understanding, in my opinion, first of all, how capital markets work, right? Real-time gross settlement. Say that to any market maker and see what their response would be. But really what ends up happening as a result of that is they knock on the door of regulators and they say, everything that you've known for the last, I don't know how many years, forget about it. We're going to teach you a better way how to run capital markets. And I think that that does not a good thing for us as an industry, because whether you like it or not, and whether you think that you could do things better, you need to have an appreciation to why we are where we are. And in many cases, there are things that you can do better, but I would say that majority of the cases, there is a good reason why regulation has been created. So for us, a big part of the challenge was education and actually showing that on Canton, in many cases, probably in most cases, you could actually do things on a public chain in a permissioned manner, meaning everybody can join the network, but it doesn't mean that everybody can see everyone's information. Everybody can get access to every service just because they want to. So there's a lot of part of the education. Secondly, the challenge is to actually build something like that that works. And I think that what we're seeing now in a lot of the permissionless chains, suddenly they're realizing, if I can solve for privacy and control, good luck with regulated institutions. So what they're hanging their hats on right now and hoping is that zero-knowledge proofs will be kind of the savior. My co-founder is one of the creators of zero-knowledge proofs, and we do not use it because for us, it was extremely important to make sure we use technology that is proven, has been tested, and is not futuristic if we want to do things today. So to us, the challenge, I mean, Canton has been in the work. I mean, you can ask Radko later, but I think it's like 7 years. Yesterday, there was a announcement about Global Layer 1. I have a screenshot from yesterday. Someone sent me from 2017. Radko publishing a paper about unified ledgers. So I think it takes time to build something like this. The first version of Canton actually went out in 2020, and we weren't in a rush to just launch a public network because we also understand what are the consequences of getting it right or getting it wrong. Sorry. So for the last 4 years, we have customers that are heavily regulated using Canton, and I promise you, we've found ways to do things better. It's just if we're thinking about the opportunity of public networks, how they can transform capital markets and other industries, it just takes time to get it right.
So a couple of things you mentioned, one is the regulators. And I think from an education perspective, we're here, most of us are here for Point Zero this week in Zurich. And I think, the Monetary Authority of Singapore and other regulators worldwide and the BIS have been doing a lot of that education and getting the private sector very comfortable with some concepts around decentralized networks. You mentioned unified ledgers. Can you talk a little bit about what you're seeing through the different projects worldwide that are happening that align with what the Canton Network is really focused on doing?
Sure. I think when you think about what is the value proposition of blockchain, so a lot of times people talk about one source of truth, no reconciliation, OPEX reduction, all of those great things, and they are all true. But the real opportunity, and this is what people are understanding, Finternet, Global Layer 1, everything that you're seeing that is coming out in the news, is the opportunity is if all assets and applications, like the internet, could exist on the same network. So I think that was kind of even the vision of Ethereum. I mean, it's everybody understand what is the opportunity. I think the challenge is, how do you create such protocol that actually gets people comfortable to use it for what I would say mission critical systems? So again, back to that example of the internet was a protocol to interoperate data, but if there were no tools to allow you to protect data, meaning that you could share it only with whomever you want, well, the internet wouldn't be the success that it is today. So very similarly, what we're seeing is that a lot of the projects are trying to and they are struggling because they're trying to say, how can I actually have a public network where I have this interoperability, but I don't give up on privacy and control? So I don't want to name names, but there's a few projects. For example, Besu was mentioned, and I want to be nice to our friends at Linux, other projects. But for example, they brought in and they wanted to do a CBDC plus some additional applications on Besu. And suddenly they raised their hands after years of working. Yeah, we really need privacy. If we can't solve for privacy, we can get even our peers or even the companies that we regulate to agree to play on top of it. So you're seeing everybody's kind of landing and kind of funneling, in my opinion, into what we have seen from 7 years ago will be needed, which is control, privacy, and interoperability. You're seeing all of them coming in. And I think what's exciting is that, you know, we talked about privacy for such a long time and everybody hated us. Like, you don't need privacy. The world can be decentralized, permissionless. Who needs regulators? Who needs anything? Like, we can just all, you know, sing Kumbaya together. And now they realize, okay, well, reality is hitting them. And now suddenly they start to realize. So that's exciting for us because I think we've been kind of at it for such a long time. And I'm very excited that we can actually show that it works in production.
You know, I do believe that the enterprise blockchain community has always been very, very aware of privacy requirements. And if you look at the projects worldwide, whether it's Besu or others, the modularity of what privacy means and what privacy means for the individual network that is using that protocol is also very important. And looking towards making sure that these protocols do have modularity, and especially when it comes to, like central bank digital currencies, for example, love them or hate them, essentially the privacy models for each country could very drastically be different based on legislative requirements on how they deal with privacy, and we hear this over and over again. So I think privacy is incredibly important to address across the industry, but there's not going to be one solution that solves for all, for sure. And I think, we've always said it's going to be networks of networks. And today it's networks of networks of networks, as well as you think about the Canton Network. And there's always going to have to be requirements from an optionality perspective. So there's three elements that we're talking about today. We have the Canton Network, and I have a couple of questions so to make sure that the audience understands what the Canton Network is. There is the Global Synchronizer Foundation, which is the governance of the Canton Network as an independent entity that the Linux Foundation is going to be helping support the open governance of that. And then there's also the code that basically allows the Canton Network to work, which is a project called Splice that has also been open sourced by Digital Assets. And the team has been fantastic over the last few months in working to bring that over to the Hyperledger Foundation, soon to be the LF Decentralized Trust. But ultimately, those are three unique legs of the stool. How do you say, so explain to me first, the Canton Network. Is it a public blockchain? Is it a permission blockchain? Give me an overview of that, and then we'll go through the other two.
Sure. So Canton Network is public in the sense that everybody will be able to connect to it. But again, very similarly, how I can take my whatever browser and connect to the internet, it doesn't mean that I can go into, my bank account and just start using all of their products and services and see everyone's information. So it's public from an access perspective. It's not permissionless that everything that runs on it just is available for everyone. So, and again, you actually said before, like different privacy models. hence the name Canton. We do believe that there is not going to be one model that fits all. And we wanted to give the flexibility to the application provider to actually decide. For example, for those of you who know, here in Switzerland, you have a data domicile rule. The zeros and ones cannot leave the geographical borders of Switzerland. And guess what? If you wanted to be a cloud provider, you had to rethink how you do cloud, because cloud, in order to do data availability, replicates data all over the world, not in Switzerland. And very similarly, if you want to use Canton in Switzerland, you can actually configure it that the data doesn't leave Switzerland. And that's, again, back to that same challenge with Ethereum, right? That there it's just a global ledger, right? So we believe that there's going to be these different models. So the Canton Network is all of these different cantons that will set their own rules based on local local regulation, on what is their business model. There's many reasons why you would want to set your application to behave in a very unique and different manner. The foundation is governing the protocol. It's not telling different cantons, this is how you work, this is how you build your application, but it's really thinking, again, very similar to the internet. As the internet evolved, people realized, oh, we need more security. So I need security certificates on my website. I have a bug in SSH. I have all of these things. So the GSF is effectively governing who runs the underlying infrastructure and what are changes and improvements that we need to do to the protocol to have better type of technology. It, again, is not going to tell each canton, this is how you need to conduct your business. That is not what the foundation is going to do.
So that's an excellent point, right? Because that's, truly, so participants in the Canton Network can come in and, use their own protocols, have their own governance, have their own privacy, requirements, et cetera. So you have the Canton Network, you have the GSF, which is the Global Synchronizer Foundation, which is the governance of the Canton Network. And then let's talk a little bit about the code that is required to run on the Canton Network.
Yeah, so the protocol effectively that gets enforced in the Canton Network has been contributed into Splice. And there's a few other things around data models and other components that will go into Splice. But what I get even more excited about is we've been thinking quite a lot at Digital Asset around, well, what are going to be different utilities that exist in the network? So if we're thinking about, I always like to give the example that reason that Python became so popular is because of all the open source libraries that were designed by quants. So I used to work at Citadel, and I was at Citadel when Python became very popular. And it was, you could just do everything in Python without paying MATLAB at that time, which was the quant tool, right? So there's going to be, in order to drive adoption in Canton, there's going to be quite a lot of investment in different types of utilities that could enable doing all kinds of financial transactions or financial applications on Canton. And that is also going to go into Linux, because we truly believe that in order to have what we call interoperability, and you want to embed some of these financial applications, they have to be open source. So there's going to be not only some of the underlying protocol technical stuff in Linux, but also going to see quite a lot of commitment to add more and more utility that will be open sourced in Linux.
Great. So if participants want to run a Canton in the Canton Network, they can, right? It's open. How do they go about doing that?
Well, I'm not the right person for that, but at the end of the day, everything that we've done at the core is due to license. So I always get the mistake of saying we have clients that are using Canton without paying us, but they're not our clients as a result of that. So there are entities out there that do use Canton. They don't need to have any interaction with us. They can use the technology. We at Digital Asset is kind of, maybe there were the slides of Red Hat and Linux. We're more kind of, we have our Red Hat, effectively we have an enterprise edition that comes with support. It has some additional features that we've built around, but you could use Canton today in a fully open source manner and start building stuff on the technology.
Okay. And if people want to contribute to some of those artifacts in Splice and other open source projects, that's certainly open, right? Anyone can participate, and we welcome, if you go to the hyperledger.org website, the blog, we just did a post introducing Splice and how people can get involved and start contributing there as well. What about the Global Synchronizer Foundation? You have a great list. I think we said we're up to 30 participants, founding members of the GSF. What if organizations and nonprofits and others are interested in potentially being part of that governing body?
Yeah, so I think, and you'll be able to answer it better, but I think that for regulators, nonprofit, there's effectively a status and a way to join without being a paying member. If you want to be a commercial organization that is responsible for running and being part of this infrastructure, you do have to be a paying member to the Linux Foundation. I will maybe kind of like be the disappointing part is, again, Canton is not a permissionless network. And because of the mission of what it's trying to drive, it's open governance, but it means that if you're an organization that the rest of the network believe could be a negative impact on the network, they might decide that they can't be part of the network. So it's not permissionless that everybody who wants to join joins. It has to go through a governance mechanism. Everybody can be a member. Not everybody can be a validator effectively on the network. And so we encourage organizations that want to drive what I would call responsible innovation, that have again, respect to what it means to operate within a regulatory framework. I recommend to become a member and then help push the governance forward.
So, I think the digital assets team and the community that you've built around Canton have done amazing work, and really, and it's great to see the collaboration there. So let's talk a little bit about what are the priorities for the next 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months? Next year, we're here at 0.0 again. 1 year from now, where are we at?
Next priority is vacation. But after that, it's really, actually, it is really taking a breath and trying to understand what's going on, because there's quite a lot of stuff that happened over the last few weeks. If I just kind of fast forward, what I think will happen over the next year is I think you're going to see some very interesting organizations starting to do really important application on the network. For us, it's continuing the education of regulators, but really it's showing real world utility. I think that this is something that the industry has done a poor job, in my opinion, of showing that you could actually drive real world utility. And given where we are from a economic perspective, interest rates where they are, I actually think that this technology can provide quite a lot of opportunities. If it's around collateral mobility, if it's around reducing really non-differentiating processes that really don't add value when you think about it from an individual perspective. So I think that an industry can come together and actually reduce the costs quite dramatically. So for me, over the next year, it's adding more members to Linux and join the open governance. But it's actually a year from now, when you and I talk, I would actually want to show some real world applications that can actually show you that they measured the return and that the technology actually does provide the value that everybody's been talking about for the last 10 years.
Wonderful. I'll hold you to that. And hopefully I'll talk to you before the year. Well, do you want to take a question? Are there any questions?
Thanks. Hi, my name is Ralph Kubli. I'm deeply committed to open source understanding of financial assets. So you're creating another network, right? There's a lot of networks that exist already. My concern with this transition to these DLT-based environments is that everybody's thinking about the containers that travel on these networks, but not about the content. So how can we ensure that we have a unified, standardized understanding of the financial asset that travels on these networks? Because if we don't, then we're just back to the current system on another rail.
Okay, so I think what you are referring to is the data model of the assets. So listen, I think for example, Ethereum did a very good job with ERC20 and some of these standards effectively creating open data models. The nice thing about, I would say, blockchain technology, for it to work, you have to agree on a standardized data model for a specific use case in order for it to work, because everybody has to agree. So when I was talking about some of the utilities, it's exactly what you're talking about. So we are going to invest quite a lot on data models and standardization around not just what are the assets, but also what is a DVP and different, basic financial models. So there's quite a lot of investment. At the end of the day, I am a believer that standards get set by winners. I've sat around the table too many times around consortiums that try to agree what would be a future data model. And unfortunately, it's, in my opinion, in many times, unless there's a very strong financial commitment, it just takes too long. And in most times, it doesn't get to the destination that it tried to achieve. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to say we're committed, exactly like you said, to providing open data standards for both assets and applications. And hopefully we work with organizations that can actually bring utility. Once you have utility, you have consumption. That, in my opinion, how standards get created, as long as you are committed to that from day one. So that's why a digital asset, pretty much all of our core technology is Apache 2 license from day one. Even when we didn't have open governance, all of our technology was Apache 2 license. So it's a super important topic. I wish I had a better answer that as an industry, we can all come together and move at the pace that is needed to create it. I think the reality is the best way to create those standards is actually to find real world use cases that have an immediate need and show that these standards can get created by actually providing utility and value to the market.
Maybe one more quick question if someone has one. Otherwise, thank you very much. So I always remember Canton is referring to the Swiss cantons. So there's tiny bit of Swiss DNA, also engineering involved. So I'm excited to see the utility and the use cases. And Daniela now will hold you accountable, and Ralph too, I'm sure.
Just to be clear, it's a French canton because it's with a C.
I see. Oh, that's another debate now. We don't want to talk about French politics at the moment. Thank you very much. Thank you for making it. You all, pleasure having you. Thank you, Daniela. Thank you. You can leave the microphone. You get some chocolates, obviously. The discussion before, actually, when you remember what Jutta said, she actually praised Switzerland because Switzerland has an exchange that is working on blockchain and blockchain technology and capital markets. So that exchange is here today. I'm delighted to welcome Davey News. See, he's moving. Thank you. He's accompanied by someone who's also been very instrumental in a lot of the pilots. We have Dr. Thomas Moser here from the Swiss National Bank.